What's up, everybody? So, this time I'm talking about The Breakfast Club. And yes, I will be going through most of the classic movies that John Hughes wrote, and some of them he directed. This particular movie, I love the place that it holds in, I guess at this point, almost cultural history. This year is the, do my math, 40th anniversary of The Breakfast Club, and it still holds strong, even though there are things that might seem incredibly dated, about fashion, music, even some of the lingo with which the characters speak. But it's still one of those movies that you can go back to, and the story is timeless, the themes are timeless, the character struggles are still relatable, and it's, once a movie is inducted into the United States Library of Congress, it's reached a certain level, in the zeitgeist, almost for all time. It is a pop culture thing of the 80s, but the fact that it's gone on, I mean, there have been uh, releases of it in movie theaters on like the 30th anniversary. It was at South by Southwest not too long ago, where some of the original cast members showed up and did a Q&A session with the people. So it's in rarefied air. You know, it might not be at the same level of movies like The Godfather, but the meaning that it has for people, I think, is just as significant. For those of you who've never seen it, welcome to the real world. It's a movie about five characters, five completely different backgrounds, how they have a full day of detention at this high school. And the assistant principal, who is basically going to be there, gives them a task. It's like, okay, you're going to be here all day. Your one thing to do before you leave today is to write a 1,000-word essay on who you think you are. I guess, from an educator standpoint, like, hey, let's let them reflect on who they are, and maybe that'll change their image, change their behavior, change their idea of who they are, so that they'll never end up, coming to detention for a full day again. First off, one of the main things, looking back at it now, that is, I guess, taken for granted about this movie is that it takes place in one day. So many movies now, especially since the comic book movie has basically become the movie industry, everything happens over the course of weeks, months, years. I mean, time jumps is a big thing these days. So the fact that it's so contained within one day, and so much happened in one day, that it's a nice kind of, I wouldn't say convention, but it's a nice limitation. So that way, as a writer, you don't get like, oh, they'll figure this out, way later. No, you got to create the circumstances within the story so that they can overcome the obstacle or make the realization in this amount of time. How do we make that happen? The characters, even though they play certain archetypes, Emilio Estevez's Andrew Clark is the jock. Molly Ringwald's Claire is, the pretty popular girl. Judd Nelson's Bender is, the rebel. You have Ali Sheedy playing the outcast. You have Anthony Michael Hall playing the nerd. So these are common tropes, common archetypes within a high school setting. And now you have everyone who, on the surface of it, looks incredibly different. How could they possibly have anything in common? Maybe, and they kind of play into how maybe two of them can have some kind of connection with Emilio Estevez's character and Molly Ringwald's character. It's like they set it up in the beginning where it kind of looks like maybe they could, develop into something more. But I like how our expectations are subverted with that. It's like, okay, maybe it's gonna be two people versus and everyone else. Like, let's break up into tribes almost. But then when there's that lovely scene where they're all just sitting down on the floor talking about how they ended up there, and all of a sudden these perceived distinctions between their place, their status in the school, that it's all kind of meaningless, and we're way more similar than we are different. I thought that was just a nice little setup piece at the beginning of the movie, and as the movie progresses, little by little things unfold. So it's like, yes, you have those two characters at one point, in the beginning, seeming to make a connection. The next thing you know, you have another scene with Bender, Anthony Michael Hall, and Molly Ringwald. So now they're kind of playing with that. And then you have that, very girly scene between Molly Ringwald and Ali Sheedy's character, where, she kind of does her makeup and, fixes her hair a little bit, just to try something new. So everyone in their own way, they really kind of evolve, and they're different people, even though they might be considered in that same social class, so to speak, in the movie. And a lot is talked about the soundtrack, but really it's just one song, where it's like, Don't You Forget About Me by Simple Minds. And it's such a simple line in the song because, okay, here are the five of us making this connection, getting to know each other better. When we go back to school, are we still going to acknowledge each other for that? Like the song says, will you recognize me, walk my way kind of thing? Where it's like, are we just going to cross paths and maybe just a nod, but continue with the same group of friends that, we've always had? And I think those are really, really interesting questions, even for today's teenagers. Anyways, what about you guys? Let me know what you think in the comments below. Smash that like button, give me a follow, and I'll see you guys next time.